Hello and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, L&D's role in driving organizational change, sponsored by SweetRush, Leadership Progress Cycle by Niche Academy, ELB Learning, HSI, Atana, and Open Sesame. So I'm Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of today's program. If you haven't already, open your chat and drop in where you're signing in from today. Throughout today's event, we will be using that chat window to interact with our speaker with any comments and questions. And this session in particular is going to be a jam-packed session covering over 10 plus case studies. So with that being said, we will try to address all your questions as they come in. And at the end of your time with us, you'll notice a short evaluation survey has popped open in another tab in your browser, and we would appreciate hearing your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand session. If this is your first Training Industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research report, our membership, our podcast, the list goes on. So visit trainingindustry.com to learn more. And we would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media. So follow us on your favorite platform so we can kind of continue that conversation. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to this dynamic duo. John Cleave is the Director of Systematic Solutions at SweetRush. After earning an MA in Corporate Education and a PhD in Computer Science at Northwest University, John has been involved in the design and development of large-scale learning programs for hundreds of clients, as well as innovating and adapting learning simulation-based skills assessment and a learning path level delivery. And then Tiffany Vonosky is a 2022 e-learning industry trailblazer and IDEO certified design thinking expert with 20 years of L&D experience. As a senior learning strategist, she has the pleasure of sharing stories about how clients and teams work together to create innovative learning solutions that make the world a better place. And with that, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Liz. All right. And so I'm going to share my screen here and select it. Okay. Does everybody see my screen?
We are seeing it, John.
Looks like we did. All right. So this is going to be a lightning round today, very, very fast. And I apologize in advance because I'm going to be talking about L&D roles in driving organizational change, which is the theme of this leader talk that training industry is doing. And I'm going to do it by going through 11 case studies, documented case studies where L&D actually brought about organizational change. And doing so, I'm going to be applying a model that we found very useful in determining what ingredients each has that made it succeed. So 11 case studies, we've got 30 minutes to crank through them. So let's get started. All right. So let's start with the biggest word on the page, transformation. What do we mean by transformation? And we define it, at least, if not Merriam-Webster, as an act, process, or instance of changing something in character or composition. And for us, we want to talk about learner transformation. So what we mean is an act, process, or instance of changing learners in character or composition. So it's not just teaching them something, it's changing them in some way. And moreover, we're doing it with an end in mind. We want to help them. We also want to help their organization. So why does this matter? It's important, and it's why I think all of us are in L&D right now. We make learners more successful in their careers and their lives. That's going to help the organization, and it lets us do good in the world. We can help managers make life better for employees. We can help crisis workers keep people alive and safe. We can help nurses handle violence in the workplace, and on and on. It's really the reason why I'm in the field, and I'm guessing it's probably the same with all of you. So here is our Transformational Design Standards. It's a framework that SweetRush spent literally 2 years trying to figure out, because we wanted to have a way to talk about what are the elements in a transformational design that's going to lead to organizational improvement. You're going to hear me talk a lot about learning experience, or the acronym LX. And what that means is an ILT, instructor-led training, classroom, it's e-learning, it's a PDF, it's whatever the experience is that we put people through, hoping to transform them. So I'd like to walk through these standards real quickly. They're going to be ever present throughout the case studies, but just so that you understand the definitions of these. 4 of them on the left are all about the experience within the LX. So when a learner is going through any learning module or taking a class or whatever, what are the attributes that we believe will lead to learnings that are beneficial for them in the org? And the ones on the right are all about after the LX. What change did we make to them? What was the ultimate outcome of the LX that we did? So starting on the left side, you have relevant. Relevant means that the LX should build on what's important for learners so that they engage. Here, it's all about the WIFM. Why should I invest in the training? Make it clear to learners throughout. Adaptive means that the LX should accommodate differences in learner skills, experience, and responsibilities. We know that learners aren't all the same. We should adjust to that to make sure that the learning works for everybody. Intuitive means that the LX should be easy to comprehend so that we're trying to minimize cognitive load here so learners can focus on the subject and not how to navigate the interface. And finally, from an efficiency standpoint, we got to respect learners' time. People have something like 27 minutes a week to devote to betterment. So let's make sure we take advantage of every one of those minutes. So now the 4 transformational standards on the right side are all about after the LX. And the first one is memorable, which means obviously once it's done, we hope that they remembered something, that they're able to apply their knowledge and skills in their daily routines. From a connective standpoint, the LX should always better integrate them into systems, into organizations or social networks or processes that they engage in or the technology that they're dealing with. We somehow have to connect them better to these systems so that they can operate. Empowering is all about equipping the learner with the means to act. And it also means to give them confidence because, their ability to act is really hinging on their perception as to whether they are able to act. So we really want to make sure they're confident as well as enabled with the means to do the things that we want them to do. And then finally, the gold standard of the standards is effective, where the LX should make learners more proficient at something so they perform better, and therefore so the organization performs better. So we're now on to the case studies. So here they are, as you can see, and these represent a wide range of organizations and needs. Some involved just a couple hours of training, others were involved many weeks and months of it. So they're tried to pick ones that were in very different circumstances, but all of them led to organizational change. In order to protect the IP and the business strategy of the companies that were involved in this, I masked the identity of each organization and omitted some of the telling details. But trust me, these are all real, and the needs are definitely real as well. And I'm going to go through them rapidly, as I said. And the reason I'm going to try to do breadth versus depth is I really want you to spot the patterns that exist across them instead of focusing in deeply on any particular one. And so for each of the ones, when I present the situation and what they did and how it turned out, I'm going to be focusing on a couple interesting insights using the Transformational Design Standards as lenses. So let's move to the first one, treating customers better. So here we had a hospitality chain. They've got 7,000 properties under 19 brands in 119 countries. And they had a need to help 28,000 team members deliver exceptional customer service. Now, it wasn't like they were delivering poor customer service, but they realized they needed to get them from great to the next level of great because this was critical to their brand. When you walked into one of their hotels, you really wanted to feel like you were treated as a special a VIP, and they needed to help their 28K team members provide that kind of an experience. So the results, I should say the approach was that they did a combination of e-learning, they had some group-led training, they had team huddles, and they also had a conference for general managers and sales directors. And the results were great. 80% of the properties that participated saw an increase in customer satisfaction scores. So service went up by 6%, staff helpfulness went up by 3%, and problem-free stays went up by 3%. And what this translates into is more revenue. More guests staying at more properties means that the company is more successful. And I want to highlight 3 insights that came out of this. The first one relates to the effectiveness standard, that they established a clear KPI at the very start of developing this training, namely the customer satisfaction scores, or CSAT scores. This was important because they knew we had to raise the customer satisfaction scores. It was a true north throughout the design and development. And not only that, but as it was deployed, they could look at that and measure in order to determine, are they making an impact? And is the organization actually changing? Very important thing to do if you're really after organizational improvement. The next insight was related to the connective standard, which is they saw the importance of senior leaders' buy-in. I mean, this isn't going to work if managers and owners of the various properties didn't have any interest in contributing to it. So they dedicated an annual conference to the initiative, and they got the senior leaders to participate in the training. So really important to get the senior leaders' buy-in in order to make this thing a success, which we attribute to the connective standard. And finally, it's the adaptive standard, which is flexibility was crucial here. I mean, there are 7,000 properties, as I said. Each one had their own way of doing things. They had their own local facilitators to help execute the training. So it really couldn't just be a one size fits all. It really had to be adaptable to the various properties in the various countries that were involved in it. So all in all, very successful thing, and we believe conform to a couple of the standards in particular. All right, let's look at the second one, which is getting people into needed roles. Here you had a financial services company. They had 5 million customers. They have 1,500 branches. And this company really focuses in on a high-touch, customer-centered approach. And a problem that they were facing is they had a high turnover combined with a lot of growth. So they were losing their experienced employees. They also had a need for more employees. So they really had to get new folks up to speed quickly in it. And that was the challenge that they faced. So what we did is we re-engineered their onboarding and management training programs, which were existing week-long ILT sessions. We converted those into bite-sized modules, which could be consumed flexibly. We also created job aids that enabled learners to access information as they work work with customers and handle transactions, which is true learning in the flow of work. So what were the results? End of the day, they reduced the time from 50 hours on average to get somebody into their role to about half that. And they didn't sacrifice the quality of the training. Their monitoring of the customer satisfaction scores remained at an acceptably high level. So it succeeded in getting this. And I want to point out a couple interesting aspects to the approach that they all took. First one is an apprenticeship model. So what they decided to do was for people going through this onboarding program, if they showed some proficiency or suitable proficiency, they would be assigned to handle simpler custom requests, like to look up a balance or make a wire transfer while they were learning more advanced knowledge and skills over time. So rather than send them through the entire program and then put them out in the offices facing customers, they got them out in the offices earlier. And at the same time, if there were people that needed a little bit more support and help to get to that level of proficiency, they were granted it. So there wasn't necessarily the rush to get everybody out there. They went out there when they were ready. And as a result, they got more employees productive more quickly. And a side effect of this was learners could actually experience what it was like to handle real customer requests, which gives them context. Very important aspect of this was the fact that they could see why they were learning the stuff they were learning because they saw how it applied in the day-to-day dealings with the customers. The other piece that I want to bring up, which we attribute to the memorable standard, is, they had these modular training units that could be mixed and matched to address specific roles, regions, and learner capabilities. The old approach, there was a complaint that it was kind of a fire hose of info. They were getting a whole lot of stuff all at once in that week-long ILT, in one ear, out the other. Under the new approach, learners had more freedom in where they spent their time. So they could spend more time in areas that they needed more help in, and they could move more quickly through areas that they already seemed to have got to get. So it really contributed to making the skills and knowledge stick. All right, so the next one is improving managers' leadership skills. So this was a $44 billion company. They had thousands of managers, and they wanted to help their leadership skills so they could better help their employees achieve work-life balance and manage workloads. With COVID and remote work, supporting teams became very, very hard, and they recognized that there was a need to help managers help their employees much more effectively. So what we did is we created a dedicated platform that managers could visit. And then once a week, over 17 weeks, We sent an email to them that had a short, easily consumable learning experience that helped managers improve. It used a trigger, activity, and outcome approach, which is you send an email that gave them a link to, let's say, a TED Talk or the like, and then they were given a reflection activity where they could think about what they gained from the learning experience and help kind of integrate it into their daily practice. So what were the results here? Ultimately, 1,700 managers participated in the program. And in fact, it was so popular that there was a wait list, that there were more managers than who were targeted for this that wanted in than we got them into. We also had for the weekly emails, it was an open rate of about 42.5%. So almost half of the people that the emails were sent to were clicking on them and going through it. And as you all know from probably having experience doing this, that's a really high number. It's so easy to skip over an email link that's sent to you. So it tells you something, as I'll get into. And finally, the manager surveys were great. We had a net promoter score of 95, and most managers reported that it did indeed help them acquire new habits. So very positive reception of it. And two insights came out of this. One of which is, since the program was voluntary, participation measures are useful. I know we poo-poo Kirkpatrick's level ones, but in this case, they didn't have to do it. And if they didn't see value, our guess is they wouldn't have clicked it. There was no reason to, other than they are getting value out of it. So we believe that participation metrics is a measure of relevance, very, very, very much so. The second one was its efficiency. We presented one activity a week. They had all week to do it, and they could skip if they wanted. So managers were able to fit it into their day. It's a reason why I think so many managers actually participated in it. So going on to number 4. So what is 4 about? So imagine you received a job offer from a company and you said yes, and you're excited. It's a chance to do something new, and you like the idea of working in this new position. But then you hear nothing from the company for weeks. It's just radio silence. So what impression does that make on you? Probably not positive. A company with 100,000 employees across 6 regions and 3 different divisions saw that many new hires were getting lost in the shuffle. And they think maybe a big piece of that was we weren't getting back to them. So they saw that many weren't making it 6 months into their employment, and this meant that roles remained unfilled, and the whole recruiting process had to begin again if somebody leaves. So definitely a problem. And so what they did is they created a custom website that was dedicated to employee onboarding. And they sent a link to that website with the reply to there when they signed the acceptance letter. So same day they sign, they get a link to say, come on in, learn about the organization, learn about their role, learn about the divisions and the way that the company does its business and so on. They had to host this externally so that it could be accessed even before new hires were assigned company credentials. So because they knew the importance was to get to people right away and not wait weeks and weeks. And the results were good. They had a very high net promoter score. They also had a very high scoring. They rated the experience 4.3 on a scale of 5. And so 89% of all new hires, which was over 1,000, have participated. And we felt that, again, participation rates are great here. We believe that showed a signal that they were connecting with the approach that we took. The insights that came out of this, one of which is time matters with onboarding. You don't want to leave people hanging. Many mentioned explicitly that they appreciated being able to get started right away. The second insight here is that allowing new hires to see other new hires was really well received. And so if you see on the right with that screen where it says that's amazing, you had a chance once you logged in to be able to see new hires who are also going through the same process as you. And we got really high marks for that from new hires. There's something about knowing that you're not alone on this journey, but that there are others that are doing the same thing as you. It's really important. And that connects to the connective standard. There's real value in creating cohort groups of new hires so they can reinforce each other and begin forming social networks. And the other thing I want to point out too, which is we attribute to the effective standard is, L&D is not the whole picture. It's just one piece of the puzzle. I mean, if you go through this process and you're positively disposed, but then it takes a month for you to get a laptop, or you struggle getting your 401k and getting your benefits squared away and getting office space assigned, you're still going to, kind of feel disconnected from the company. So recognize that L&D can do a lot here, but the organization itself has to come through. That onboarding is a comprehensive thing. It's not just the training thing. Important item to note. All right, so we're going to the fifth one, onboarding across regions by local L&D. So a manufacturer wanted new hires across the globe to feel that they joined a kind of family that cares about its members, how its members are treated. That, this is a family-run company. Family is very important. You want to feel part of the fabric that's there. And the big issue that they had was that they have dozens and dozens of facilities in many different countries. They had 3 separate product lines, and most L&D functioning is handled at each facility. So they don't really have a strong central L&D. It's all decentralized and out there. So therefore, flexibility had to be critical here. And even more so, they had 2 distinct groups of people. They had hourly employees who were working in production who didn't have access to a computer. And then they had everyone else who did, and likely a desk to sit at while they used that computer. So they had to create a suite of e-learning modules. And then for each of them, they have an analog equivalent. So for instance, they had both a physical and virtual escape room game. They had physical and digital welcome gifts to provide to each learner. So they had to have both a digital and analog solution for each of the pieces of the onboarding program that they built. And they also created a SharePoint site that provided managers with a one-stop resource that they could go to download training materials, to get advice, and to help them in helping new hires get up to speed and in place. So results were good. They have been able to successfully deploy the program in most locations. They're still getting them into a few corners of the world. But China, Europe, South America, North America, it's all in place. And what they'll be doing now is they'll be closely monitoring various KPIs to judge its success. Things like retention data, productivity metrics, surveys, exit interviews, and participation rates are all going to be fed into the hopper to make sure that indeed people are feeling part of the company and that they are becoming productive and happy with their employment choice. So the insights that are here, the first one I've already talked about, which is flexibility, was critical to this. It had to be adaptable in China, in Europe, in the U.S., in different kinds of facilities who were creating different kinds of products. Flexibility was, and you probably heard me say this already half a dozen times. Flexibility inevitably is pretty important whenever you're going globally with any kind of L&D initiative. They also, as I said, the digital-only solution wouldn't work, though they knew from the beginning that they had to create both digital and analog versions. And of course, this adds to cost, but the adaptiveness that this brings about it was critical. If you went with digital only, it wouldn't work for all of the employees. And so that's an example of being adaptive across your learner population. And then again, as I had said previously, managers inevitably play a key role in this. And so offering a SharePoint site to them who are busy, and obviously they're doing a lot more than just getting a new hire in place and getting them up to speed. We want to make it easy for them to go and, download a presentation or a PDF, a job aid of sorts that they could use in order to help them throughout the journey. So they segmented it into, day 1 to day 10 and day 10 to day 20 and so on and so forth. And managers had a lot of help to help execute all of this across the life cycle of the new hire. All right, so we're at about the halfway point of this lightning rounds of case studies. So in this case, it's all about handling customer problems well. And imagine that you traveled a great distance, you're tired, it's late, you just want to sleep, but the air conditioning unit in your room is making a noise. It's bothering the heck out of you. So you go down to the front desk to complain about this. And really, how that employee responds to you makes all the difference in the world. It really is an important thing. You want to feel heard. You want them to feel that they, regret that you are having this. They want to see you take steps to resolve it. It's a critical piece. And this hospitality company recognized how critical it was, and they opted to provide opportunities to employees to practice responding to guest problems. So what they did is they created e-learning modules in which you go in and you hear a guest complain, and then you speak your response into the mic. And that's then converted into text, and it's fed into a large language model, generative AI, which evaluates your response to a customer service model, and then its feedback is presented to you. And the results were good. They're still coming in, but they are seeing a decrease in the reporting of customer problems. And they're also seeing an increase in customers saying that an employee handled their problem well. The other side effect of this is that we have a whole lot of really interesting data, that we have all of their spoken attempts to respond to the customer. So we can look at that very closely to say, how are people responding to customers? Are they following the model that we had given to them? And we can also look for improvement over time. Do we see that people get steadily better in their responses with a greater amount of practice? So as everyone knows, data is a hugely valuable thing. And the use of these spoken responses in the large language model gives us a lot of data to work with. And the three insights that we have here, the first one is that technology was huge in this. It solves a number of logistic issues. It can be scaled. They can use it on any device. They can use it whenever they want, anywhere they want. We can easily add additional scenarios over time to give them more and more practice. It couldn't have been done if we were trying to use live role play at the various properties. The other piece related to that is it could deliver personalized feedback to every learner. So, if somebody nailed it, then we can just come back and go, yeah, you're nailing it. Can go forth and prosper. If somebody's really struggling, we can give them more and more practice, and we can give them feedback to say, hey, you forgot to apologize. You didn't thank the Gus for coming to you with the problem. We can give them feedback that's very personalized to their particular execution of the model that we gave them. The other piece related to this is for the relevant and intuitive standards. I mean, this is a real world guest issues. You can see by the screens that, you're in the right situation. You're talking to an actual guest or a virtual guest. It felt just like the real thing. So transfer from the e-learning module onto the floor and live actual interactions with guests. It's intuitive. It just flows right from one to the other. So very important standards here were in play, relevant and intuitive. And then finally, you'll notice that none of the outcome-based standards are highlighted here. And a big reason for this is it takes time to determine whether the program was memorable, connective, empowering, and or effective. We're still gathering the data in effect to know, do they remember the customer service model when they're on the floor? Are they feeling capable of executing on the response to the customer's problem, and so on and so forth. So tune in 6 months, and hopefully we'll have more data that lets us highlight other aspects of the transformational design standards. All right, here we have a global consulting firm, and they recognize the need to grow learners to take on highly complex, high revenue projects. Because not doing so, they realize, would mean losing out on a lot of opportunity and therefore revenue. One of the challenges they faced in growing these future leaders is the fact that there's a huge variation in the skills and experience of the candidates. They also didn't have a global definition of what good looks like. So they didn't really have any way to benchmark performance. And as a result, they developed a 17-week competency-based learning experience. So 4 months. This included classes led by executives, large group, classes and discussion led by executives. They had cohort groups of future leaders that worked together on assignments. They had one-to-one mentoring conversations, and then they also had a competency-based assessment to measure each learner's mastery in order to determine their fitness for performance. As a result, they had a 2% growth in proposals and contract reviews. And that represents a pretty significant revenue gain, obviously. They also saw a 10% increase in certifications, which are audited measures of skills and knowledge. Since this consulting firm is in the largely technical field, making sure that the leaders had the necessary skills and knowledge was a critical piece of it. And the learners were very positive about the experience. They gave it an NPS of 55, which is good considering the scale of it. A couple of insights that we can look at here. First of all, we knew from the beginning that senior leaders needed to be heavily involved in this. They had the wisdom and insight, and they needed to pass that on to the next generation. So from the beginning, we recognized that getting the executives to buy in and actually participate and lead the large group discussions was a fundamental need for this L&D design. And the other, because of that, largely, they could only take so many future leaders a year into the program, 72 to be exact. So they couldn't offer it to every potential candidate. They had to come up with a way to screen and prioritize them. So the more promising ones are given a chance first. And so they partially solved that by giving each region was allocated a percentage of seats based on its relative revenue contribution. So they allowed each region to determine who are our most promising people, and then those were the ones that were enrolled in the program. And a side effect of all of this turned out to be a pretty critical thing. When I talked about that they didn't have any definition of what good looks like, they were able to work together to reach consensus on 16 core competencies for project leaders that could be applied globally. And that's not an easy thing to do. But once they arrived at it, they had all sorts of affordances that came out of it. It's great for assessing somebody's readiness to enroll in the program. It allows you to track progress and see are the people who are going through this training becoming better in those 16 competencies. And then it allows them in the future to add more adaptive capabilities. So somebody who's struggling with a given competency could be given more help and assistance to shore them up so that they're more likely to become that future leader that they were seeking. Okay, so moving on to number 8. Global software company that needed to improve how its salespeople sold the company's array of services. So here's a software company. They want to make their people better salespeople. A lot of them are Gen Z and millennials, and they really weren't that great in the eyes of the company at recommending effective solutions to meet customer needs. So what they did is they developed a training program to inspire and motivate learners to engage with customers. One of the challenges that they faced with this was the fact is that a lot of their products and services are very complex technically and really involve a whole lot of elements that they have to master in order to be a good advisor to a customer. A big related to that is confidence is king. I mean, one of the reasons why salespeople were more order takers than consultants and advisors is because maybe they didn't feel confident to talk about highly technical subjects. So they knew they had to get them comfortable offering advice. That was a pretty important piece of this. And the way they solved this is they created a series of e-learning modules, combination of e-learning and ILT, 80% e-learning and 20% instructor-led classroom training. They organized it under 5 product pillars. And for each of those pillars, they developed 3 levels of mastery, which they used the metaphor of the martial arts belts. So there was a green belt, blue belt, and black belt that you could potentially achieve in each of the 5 pillars. And if you did achieve them, you could actually display them in your profile. So it was a company recognized level of expertise that you've achieved. And they found it worked really well. There was a clear correlation between belt achievement and sales performance. They also overall had a higher bid win rate, 16% higher, and a higher pitch size. So the dollar volume of each pitch was higher, 12% higher. They also saw that seller confidence increased across all products. 7% increase for mobile, 5% for brand products, and 6.4% for programmatic products. And as I said before, confidence is a big piece of empowerment. Is you want them to feel like they can do it, and that's separate than whether they can do it or not. They have to feel like they can do it. 2 pieces of insight that came out of this. The first one is that 3 levels of expertise was huge. It gave them confidence to say, "Hey, I just achieved a black belt in mobile products." You feel pretty good about that. Now you're motivated maybe to shore up and win belts in some of the other pillars. And it also gave the company a really useful metric for tracking. How many of our people are achieving green belts and blue belts and black belts. So developing levels of expertise within competencies are a great way to stay on top of whether you're making people better at whatever you're trying to do. The other piece that we put under the intuitive standard is the notion, that they recognize the need to anoint curriculum managers. So they realize that in order for these curriculums to make sense, they had to identify people who knew the subject matter well and who also understood instructional design well so that they could direct the subject matter experts and instructional designers on this. And so they had a curriculum manager for each of the pillars, and this was critical, very useful in helping shape and define the curriculum so that the progress is clear and people understood what they were learning and understood the pathway through the training to get to the levels of mastery that they finally achieved. All right, got three more. So this one is helping engineers communicate better. So imagine, I'm sure you've all done this, where you have a problem with a technical product that you've got, you call tech support, and you're talking to somebody who just couldn't explain it to you, didn't necessarily seem to care about your issue, just wasn't there to help. It's very frustrating, I'm sure, if you've done that, if you've experienced that. It really gets you annoyed. And for a large electronics manufacturer, this was a problem. Its engineers were technically proficient, but they struggled to communicate well with customers. In customer surveys, 23% of the customers mentioned that it was a problem, and it was the number two pain point the company identified. And I'll tell you that this one I'm sensitive to because I'm an engineer, and so I can relate to the difficulty oftentimes in talking about a technical subject with somebody who doesn't necessarily have the technical proficiency that you have. It's not easy. So their solution was a multi-tiered learning program for all engineers, and they organized it into 4 tracks. They also established badges for each of the tracks to recognize the mastery, just like the last case study that I talked about did. And they had a point system. So ultimately, if you engage in the training more frequently, you earn points, and those points are then tracked. We believe that increased learner confidence, that they feel like, yeah, I'm keep going back in there, and I'm earning points. I must be doing the right thing. I must be on my way to be a better communicator. And it also gave us, as the L&D administrators, data that we could see that, yeah, people are using it. They are coming back again and again. We can stay on top of the fact that, yeah, they are making use of the learning experiences that we gave them. So what were the results here? 20% rise in customer satisfaction. Only 5% of customers mentioned communications as an issue at some period later after the training was all rolled out. And of those that did mention that communications was an issue, 80% were ultimately satisfied with the outcome. And so communications dropped from the customer's number two pain point to number six. And in fact, communications is now one of the top 10 reasons a customer would recommend the company to colleagues. So they seem to have licked it. They seem to make the engineers better communicators. This has led to the customers being happier with the company as a whole. And the lessons that came out of this was, the first one was, we recognized that change management was critical here. I mean, a lot of the engineers probably felt they were doing a perfectly fine job on the phone, diagnosing issues and providing issues, don't really necessarily see the need to change the way that they've been doing their work for, in many cases, decades. Not only that, but learning and development at this company was largely tech-centric. It really didn't focus at all on soft skills. So bringing in soft skill training was a new thing for them. And so they recognized they needed to make a really strong whiff to get the engineers to realize that not only will it make their lives better, but it's going to help the organization. So they tried to connect communication to, this is the way for the company to make customers happier, earn more revenue, rise the tide that'll float all of our boats. So one way that it did that was it rolled out a series of videos in advance of the training to really make the case that communication was a critical piece of the company's offerings to customers, and therefore underscore the importance of mastering that. And then the other thing that was probably no surprise to any of you is the fact that, you don't take an hour e-learning and then suddenly you're a better communicator. It takes a lot of time. You have to do it again and again and again. So when I talked about that multi-tiered learning program, I mean, they had workshops, they had e-learning, they had a whole lot of opportunities for you to continue to practice and master this stuff. And that's really important for memorability. It's so hard to get somebody to remember something if you just have one shot at them. You really got to dedicate a lot of time and give them the space to practice and get better over that time.
John, speaking of time, we are on our last 2 minutes if we want to get to Q&A. So just wanted
All
to
right,
flag
yeah,
that for
I
you.
will do that. Yeah, and so I will well, I'll just briefly to explain it, that you had 3,000 retail stores. Try to get consultative. You can see now the standards are showing up, relevant and intuitive, memorable and effective here. They actually had a very effective, a metric for effective that was great, which is average transaction values that were raised by $2, which means millions of bucks for here. So the 11th one is when you're getting resellers to recommend your products. Here you have dealerships that are attempting to, they want the dealerships to sell their products over the others, but it was voluntary training. And so they recognized that they had to make them want to do it. So relevance was critical here. And so as a result, got 22,000 learners that were engaged, over 1 million course completions. And again, because it was voluntary, participation metrics are useful. Very well. And then short bursts of training over longer ones makes more sense here, given that they spend most of their time on the floor dealing with customers. So real quick takeaway is the transformational design standards that are here. So we put or are putting a one-page infographic that shows you the 8 standards. We find them helpful. Keep asking these kinds of questions. How is it relevant? How is it intuitive? How is it adaptive and efficient? And then, thinking about once the LX is done, how do we make it memorable? How do we make it connective? How do we make it empowering? How do we make it effective? We find that asking these questions over and over again as we're designing learning experiences is a good way to stay focused on learner transformation in order to make organizations better. All right. Very little about us. Tiffany, I don't know if you want to.
Sure. I'll make this really fast. If you'd like to talk further about any of these case studies, you have a need to drive change at your organization, please reach out. We talk about performance improvement and digital transformation strategies, which include custom learning. Someone just asked a question, and these are absolutely custom. Emerging technologies, staff augmentation, talent placement, and strategic consulting. So we are very honored to receive numerous industry awards, including a few from our host training industry. There have been some questions, John. Let's get to as many as we can.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm going to be running a little quickly here. So one from chat that I think might be relatively quick to answer would be, what system was used, tool system platform was used for the AI role play? We had a couple of folks curious about that. I believe that was the hospitality one.
Yeah, exactly. That was a hospitality to teach them how to respond to guest issues. That was a combination of things. It was a custom e-learning module that we built, HTML module that was built. It made use of the Anthropic LLM. I honestly cannot give you the actual which version, which these days becomes very important. We've used it though, in a number of occasions with a number of LLMs. You basically give a prompt that includes the customer service model that you want to evaluate the learner against. You convert, audio to text, their response into the mic, and then you feed the prompt about the customer service model and their response into the LLM. It then comes back with feedback that are tagged to each of the elements of the customer service model, and then you package and present it to the learner. And we used a little, kind of robotic-like device to be the element that provides the feedback to them. But it wasn't an authoring tool. That was a custom HTML that was developed using a commercially available LLM.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another question, and I believe this relates to the manufacturing company, that the welcome kit and the activities. Someone's wondering, why not use the mobile option for the company that had a lot of trainees without a computer?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that has to do with, in certain of the regions, there are very strict union rules and employee regulations that prohibit the use of a worker's own devices in the thing. A lot of them are hourly, and it turns out, and not only that, but then they can't actually even learn on their own time. They have to be paid for the training they do, and they aren't allowed to use their own phone. And so as a consequence, that wasn't open to us, unfortunately. And therefore we realized that we had to have the analog versions for at least, it wasn't most of the population, but it was enough of the population that the analog version was justified.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Someone also asked early in the presentation if our clients need help to find the necessary data to establish effective learning objectives tied to successful business result improvements.
Wait, so the question is, do they, or how do they?
Just do they? And maybe a little bit about how we help them.
Yeah, I mean, we're moving much more strongly into this area. We've always believed that it's important, but now SweetRush is really believing it's critically important to say, when you have your first conversation, to say, hey, we have this need and we think training is going to be there. It's identify a metric or identify metrics. How do we know what's the outcome look like? So you say, okay, we want to do sales training. It's an easy one. Presumably we're doing sales training because we want to increase sales or increase customer satisfaction. Then we begin to say, all right, are those the outcomes? Do we expect to see an improvement in customer satisfaction? Do we expect to see an increase in revenue? And let's establish the metrics. If they're not there, then can we get them there? But typically, if you're talking about sales and whatnot, the metrics are there, or customer satisfaction, the metrics are available. Leadership's a hard one. Typically what you have to look at is something like retention and then employee surveys. If they say my manager's an ogre, maybe you're looking for a decrease in the number who mark them as ogres. But we do believe that you identify that at the beginning, you design and build your training, you then continue to think about, is the training going to contribute to this metric? You also need to recognize that knowing if they participated or not is a critical piece of the causal model, because if you can't say that the learners went through the training, you can't say the training had any effect. And so understand the performance, the participation metrics and what those are going to look like and how you can weave that into an argument that you made a difference. And Liz
Absolutely.
has joined us.
Oh, I think she is going to usher us off stage with the vaudeville cane, perhaps.
No worries. No, this was lovely and honestly such a great conversation. Like I said, record-breaking time, like less than 40 minutes, 11 case studies. That's a proud accomplishment, honestly. But before we, tell everybody how to get to the next session, is there anything else you would like to leave with the audience today?
No, I would say, download the one pager. I honestly, that isn't a sales pitch. It's a useful model. We took a long time to do it, and we're using it with great success now in having project teams asking those questions and trying to come up with answers. I really do believe it contributes to our collective wisdom to be thinking about those 8 qualities.
Fabulous. And with that, for all the questions that weren't going to be answered, I promise you will be hearing from the SweetRush team as soon as possible. So your questions will be addressed. But I did see, Tiffany, you dropped in some LinkedIn. So if you wanted to get your answer sooner, totally reach out to these guys.
Yeah, please. I'd love to talk about any of us would love to talk about any of these cases. A lot of lessons learned that I had to skip over, but yeah, please reach out. We'd love to talk.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. And for everyone else, we will be taking that 15 to 14-minute break. And up next, we have Jared Oates joining us from Leadership Progress Cycle by Niche Academy for their session From Avoidance to Clarity, training leaders to address team conflict with confidence. So in a moment, I'm going to end this session, and you can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. Please stick around for our next session, which will begin at the top of the hour. See you soon, everybody.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining.